Welcome back to the Catholic Fertility Podcast. I'm your host, Lucia Harmeling. And as always, I'm so excited to be here with you because I have so much fun information to share today. And this is a topic that I'm super passionate about. I've been looking at HRV for a while now. I've been tracking my HRV for a long time. It was something that I looked at during pregnancy. It's also something that I look at on a regular basis just to kind of see where is my body at? How's my nervous system actually doing? How's my body recovering from everything that I'm doing? The reason I love HRV is because it's something that I've been tracking for a long time, and I'm beginning to see some patterns in the women that I'm working with their HRV who are struggling with fertility or struggling with their cycles and also their HRV. This does not mean that if you have low HRV that you're going to struggle with fertility. This does not mean if you have great HRV that you're going to be the most fertile person ever. So again, not direct connection there, but I do think that there's an indirect connection. And that's what I want to talk about because I love just digging into the data. I love just having more clarity around how to use the data that's now provided because there's so much data that's available nowadays. And so it's not about getting so hyper focused on it all the time. Like, I don't think that's helpful. And I think that can create a lot more anxiety, even for myself. However, there are times where it's nice to kind of check in and see, is everything that you're working on moving the needle for you? How is your nervous system doing? How is your body recovering? Are there any hidden underlying stressors, inflammation that could be impacting not just your overall health, but your fertility, your hormones, your mood, how you feel in your body? We're going to talk about what is HRV, why I think it's important to get a pulse on where you're at, especially if you're wearing an Aura, an ultrahuman ring, any other device that tracks your heart rate variability. We're also going to talk a little bit about what are some studies showing in regards to HRV and fertility. The whole reason I thought about doing this podcast was because over the last 3 to 4 months, I've seen a 30 to 40 point increase in my HRV just from some things that I've been trialing out and doing. And I think that's worth noting because that's a pretty drastic increase. So again, this isn't to say these are all the things you need to do, but I think it's worth experimenting with if you've tried all the things. And I know that there's some of you listening out there who do track your HRV because I have asked on Instagram, like, is this a topic that you'd be interested in? And there's so many women that have messaged me saying, please make a podcast episode on this because I am working on my fertility and my HRV is in the trash. Like, it is so low and there's nothing that I can do to bring it up, even though I'm doing all of the quote unquote right things. So that's one thing that we're going to dive into. Okay. Why don't we start off with talking about what exactly is HRV and why you should care about it? HRV is your heart rate variability. What heart rate variability looks at is the variation between heartbeats. So a higher heart rate variability, HRV, means that there is more variability with the time between heartbeats. We would ideally think that the exact amount of time between heartbeats should be the same. However, your body is constantly responding to inputs. For example, your heart rate goes up when you inhale, it goes down when you exhale. Your heart rate goes up when you're stressed, it goes down when you're calm. So you're constantly making tiny little tweaks to your heart rate. Having that ability to have a greater variability between heartbeats is actually a good thing because that means that your body is responding to the inputs as it should. It means that it's able to be flexible when it needs to be flexible and adapt based on what your body needs. So ideally, a higher heart rate variability tells us that you're adapting better. You're handling whatever inputs are being put into your body really well. A lower heart rate variability can mean that you're not adapting to what's happening in your body as well. And we'll talk about specifics of that. Now, the thing to know about heart rate variability is that there's not like one perfect number that yours should be at. I will say the higher the number, the better. So if you're looking at your Oura ring, if you're looking at your ultrahuman, I'm not sure if Whoop tracks your heart rate variability. I think it does. My husband wears one, so I should know, but I'm pretty sure that it does. And what you're looking for is trends. Like, where does yours usually land? And is it going up? Is it going down? And if you really start to look at it as a trend, what is it doing in response to the previous day, then you'll know. So for example, if you got really poor sleep, if you were extremely stressed, if you've been working out really, really hard and not giving yourself enough rest, you might see that your heart rate variability goes down. Now, if you've been giving yourself plenty of rest, if you're managing your stress well, if you are getting adequate sleep, you might see your heart rate variability go up. Again, looking at the trend, I think is more important than just really getting super anal about a specific number. I would say if I had to give you a range, because I know a lot of you are like, what's the range? If I could give you a range, I would say somewhere between 40 and 60 is decent. 70 and higher is like really good. So I know some of you out there have heart rate variabilities in your 30s and your 20s. I would really encourage you to start looking at how is my body actually doing? And chances are you may be working on other things right now that if your heart rate variability is that low, there's something that's causing that. And it can be more than one thing, right? It's not every single thing is the main cause of everything. There's usually a lot of different factors that play into our health. So it's never just one thing. However, making one shift, for example, cutting out alcohol, can significantly increase your heart rate variability. And that shouldn't be a surprise to us. The way that I like to think of heart rate variability is a marker of how your nervous system is doing. So we have the autonomic nervous system, which basically dictates all of the automatic things that our body does. And there's two branches of that. There's the parasympathetic side of the autonomic nervous system, which is your rest and digest state. And then there's the sympathetic side of the autonomic nervous system, which is fight or flight. And your body is constantly going back and forth between parasympathetic and sympathetic, because that's how our body responds. That's how we survive. That's how we live, right? Now, what I see often is women being stuck in one or the other. And that's something that I can actually see, not only just from symptoms and from talking to someone, but also from looking at their hair tissue mineral analysis test. The reason I love that is because it categorizes women, men, whoever takes it, children, into slow metabolic types and fast metabolic types. So fast metabolic types tend to spend more time in the sympathetic side of the nervous system, so more fight or flight. The slow metabolic types tend to be more in the parasympathetic side of the nervous system. So what that can actually look like is, for example, when you think parasympathetic, you think things are slowed down. So a lot of times when I see a slow metabolic type, I tend to think slower metabolism. Your adrenals are a little bit tapped out or tired. So adrenals are what help us respond to stress, or stress control center. I also think, is there a slow thyroid? So again, the whole body is kind of like slowed down because it's been undergoing chronic stress. And so I always explain it to clients like this, like if your body is one big muscle and you overwork that muscle and overwork that muscle and overwork that muscle, at some point it's going to get tired, it's going to get fatigued, it's going to get sore, it's going to slow down. So that's why I love that test too, is because it lets us see like, where are you at? How is your body responding to stress? How is it responding to inputs that you're giving it? And then on the flip side of that, if you're kind of stuck in fight or flight, that can feel like feeling really anxious all the time, not being able to sleep, maybe having a faster metabolism, faster thyroid function, not always. But those are kind of like, think of it more as this like jittery state, more like heightened awareness. I think a lot of women, myself included, have run on this go, 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 fight or flight state for so long that we don't even realize that we're functioning in that way. And so again, going back to heart rate variability, I think it's really important to see that's just like a really good indicator of how is your body responding? How is your nervous system responding? Is it responding in a way that's appropriate, or is it just not able to respond the way that it needs to because it doesn't have the resources it needs to, it doesn't have the rest that it needs to. There's like an underlying infection, there's an underlying inflammation. What is the thing going on? Okay, so let's talk about lower HRV for a second, because that's usually what I see, especially with fertility clients. I tend to see lower HRV levels. Why is HRV low, and what can cause HRV to be low? So let's work through that, because really a lower HRV reflects that our body is under some kind of physiological stress and it has less of a capacity to recover. So for example, really poor sleep quality. So if you are not getting restful sleep, I'm just going to put the example of postpartum out there. So when I've been in postpartum, my heart rate variability is usually lower because my sleep is very disrupted. I wake up several times at night. And I'm sure my cortisol levels are higher, right, to be more alert. So things like really disrupted sleep, whatever the reason is for you having more disrupted sleep, that could be a cause of that. Not getting enough sleep. So if you are going to sleep really, really late, if you're waking up extremely early, if you're just not getting in a nice 7 to 8, 9 hours of sleep. For some of you, you're like, wow, that's a lot of sleep. That is what your body needs. I would say closer to 8 is ideal if you have sleep apnea. So this is a big one and something that I think is so fascinating. And again, I'm going to share about Brett, my husband, because he's open about this stuff. He has a tongue tie. And when you have a tongue tie, obviously I'm not an expert at this, but when you have a tongue tie, your tongue more than likely does not rest on the roof of your mouth. Now, in order to signal to your body that you are in a calm state, that you are in rest and digest, you're in parasympathetic mode to be able to get a good night's sleep. When you close your mouth, your tongue should rest at the roof of your mouth. That really does activate the parasympathetic state for your body. Now, if you are a mouth breather, if you have a tongue tie, if you have a poor airway, if you just are not like getting enough oxygen throughout the night, that can significantly impact and lower your HRV. So just to give you an example, my husband has started wearing like nose tape and mouth tape to support closed mouth so that he's breathing through his nose at night and to open up his nostrils, his airway, right? The amount of oxygen that's going into his body. And he sees a significant increase in HRV on the nights where he does both of those things, which is crazy. And he wakes up feeling way more rested, way more alert and awake when he needs to be. So that's just like one little simple thing that you could try. If airway issues or mouth breathing or tongue tie is not part of your story, then I don't know if it'll make that big of a difference. But it's worth exploring, especially for someone who tracks. Another big one is stress or nervous system load. So if you are in a season of life where you have a lot of stress, and I talk about the stress bucket, your own stress bucket, a lot on my podcast. Your stress bucket is basically this bucket that holds all of the stressors that your body is feeling right now. Those are emotional, physical, you know, work stressors, family stressors, inflammation, gut infections, blood sugar dysregulation, past trauma, right? Those are all stressors that you are carrying at one time. And when your stress bucket is so full, then that's a lot on your body. And so that can actually lower HRV. If you're going to sleep feeling really stressed, really ruminating on the day or what's going to happen the next day, not being able to unwind, if you are working up until the point you go to sleep or you're on your phone, scrolling, getting that like cortisol, adrenaline up, whatever it is, and that's waking you up and keeping your brain going, you're not ready to actually go to sleep and relax. And I talk about that a lot with clients is like your bedtime routine, your wind down routine is so important for supporting good sleep, which then in turn supports good heart rate variability. Okay, exercise and physical stress. There's a balance with exercise. And I'm always trying to find that balance too. So if you're someone who struggles with over exercise or maybe never exercising, whatever the side of the spectrum that you're on, throughout our life, we find what is the right amount of exercise for a specific stage of life and what our body needs right now and what exercises feel good. So if you're someone who is an over exerciser, who can't take breaks or who does all the HIIT classes and does all the high intensity and is always go, 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 that's a lot of stress on the body. And now being in my mid 30s, my body recovers so differently. And so even if you've been doing the same exercise you've been doing for the past 15 years, your body may need something completely different now. And so it's really cool to start paying attention to how is your body recovering after hard workouts? Does your HRV overall still look decent or is it totally plummeting after really hard workouts? We recover and heal at night. And so if you've had a day of a lot of physical demands or several days of that, and you see this overall trend, again, we're not just looking at like one day and getting hyper anal about that day. We're looking at the trend overall. So if you're curious if maybe it's your exercise, really switching up what exercise you're doing, how much exercise you're doing, times of day that you're doing exercise. We'll do a whole podcast on physical activity because I do think there's a huge part of that. And it's very energy demanding, especially when we're working on fertility. So we'll do a podcast on that. Another one with exercise I see is exercising even when you're exhausted. If you're living sore, if day to day you are always sore, that should be a huge clue that your body's not recovering well. And that's really what I want you to get out of this is it's not like a specific exercise or a specific physical activity routine. It's like, is that working for your body right now? Because exercise is a good stressor in some ways, and it can also be too much, especially when our stress bucket is so full. Now, I will say those who regularly exercise in a way that is supportive of their health, that is not obsessive, that is not compulsive, that is not so high intensity that you're just like breaking your body all the time, that is associated with a higher heart rate variability because your heart, right, is better trained, is able to adapt better to stressors. Now, a big one that I see that a lot of women don't think about is under eating. So if you are chronically under eating, which you might be listening to this and being like, that's definitely not me. Most of the women that I work with in my practice are chronically under eating, whether they recognize it or not. Most of them don't. And it's subconscious, right? It's not intentional a lot of the times, but that can significantly impact heart rate variability. Not eating enough carbohydrates, that's a huge one that I also see can also impact heart rate variability. So if we are undernourished, underfueled, right? And we're not getting enough carbohydrates, that is really stressful on the body. Our nervous system's preferred source of fuel is carbohydrates. I know that protein gets a lot of hype right now, and I'm all for women getting in enough protein in their diet. I think that's so important, but we need all macronutrients. So we need protein, we need fats, and we need carbs. And carbs is one that I see, especially nowadays with the protein hype. I see that really falling off for women. And we really need to learn to bring that back in, not only just for blood sugar stability, which also impacts heart rate variability, but also so that your nervous system feels safe so that your body can recover. Another big one around eating is skipping meals or intermittent fasting, dehydration, like not getting enough fluids in, not getting in enough minerals so that you're actually retaining the fluids that you're drinking. If you're just chugging plain water by itself and you're never salting your food and you're not getting in enough of the micronutrients, your body's probably not absorbing that fluid as well as it could. So just to give you an example, if you've ever had a hydration stick like a Relight or a LMNT or gosh, there's so many on the market, a Cure or an IM8 or whatever the hydration stick powder that you're using, pickleball is another big one that I recommend. Then if you ever use one and you drink a glass of water with that versus a glass of water by itself, there's a reason why you feel more energized and more hydrated after you've had some minerals in. And I actually, before I created my new free guide, I had another free guide that's still available on my website, and it's a mineral guide. It talks about minerals and why they're so important for our health, for our mood, for our hormones. So if you are new to minerals, if you're like, I don't even know where to start with that, that's a great guide for you. I'll link it below in the show notes so you can also get access to that. Since we're talking about fluids, let's talk about alcohol. So alcohol can significantly decrease your HRV. And that shouldn't be surprising. Alcohol is a toxin, right? It's a toxin. And if we're putting that in and that's really stressful on our body, on our liver, it can affect how we regulate our carbs and impacts our sleep. So it does impact HRV. And, it's not surprising that if you go out with friends for a night of drinks, your HRV might plummet the next day. Now, again, we're not getting hyper-focused on one day or one value, but overall, if you're someone who is regularly drinking several times a week, especially if you're working on your fertility, please, please, please cut back on your alcohol or take it out completely for this period of time. Because again, it is a toxin. And if you have a lot of other stressors going on, even though in the moment it can feel really great to like unwind with that, if you're doing that regularly, it can impact your nervous system, your blood sugar regulation, just how your body's able to recover and produce hormones. Okay, viral illnesses or inflammation. So if you're sick, your heart rate variability will probably go down, right? Your body's working really, really hard to fight whatever is going on in your body. So that's a normal reason why that would go down. So whether it's a viral infection, bacterial infection, a fever. Now, here's the really interesting thing. So, if you have some source of hidden inflammation in your body, hidden meaning that you don't really know that there is inflammation going on, right? Like maybe there's a gut infection, a vaginal infection, there's inflammation from really dysregulated blood sugars, whatever the thing may be, right? A parasite. Then that low grade inflammation can also affect your heart rate variability. It can also cause it to be lower because, again, your body is fighting this chronic inflammation that you may not even know about. So, I'm going to have a biological dentist on my podcast soon, but she'll talk a lot about how your oral health, your oral microbiome, any infections, inflammation going on in the mouth can also really impact your fertility, your health, your heart rate variability, your nervous system, right? So the mouth is the entry point to our body. And so that's a big part, even especially if you have chronic gut issues, really looking at what's going on with oral health. Are there previous root canals? Are there cavities? Is there gum inflammation? Is there overgrowth of bad bacteria, candida, whatever it is in the mouth will also translate to the gut, right? It's all connected. Okay, let's talk about blood sugar issues because that's a big one. And blood sugar issues can happen for a variety of reasons. You may have a diagnosis that causes you to not be able to regulate blood sugar as well as someone who doesn't have that diagnosis. At the same time, it may just be from not eating enough. It may be from fasting. It may be from having really unbalanced meals. So if you are only eating carbohydrates all day, again, you need those fats and proteins to help your body use those carbohydrates in a more efficient way, I would say. So blood sugar issues are a huge piece of the puzzle if you're someone who's like done all the things, especially if you're someone who like eats really healthy, does all the right things, and you're still not seeing improvement in your heart rate variability. It might be worth looking into to see what your blood sugars are doing. And that's where I think sometimes pulling in a tool like a CGM, a continuous glucose monitor, can be really helpful. I don't think everybody needs that. That is something, though, that I do include in my one-on-one work with fertility clients because blood sugar is huge for hormone production and for regulating the nervous system and just supporting the body as a whole. And a lot of the times, if you just get your fasting blood sugar drawn, that can only show you like a one moment in time. And that level might look great, but what's happening throughout the day? How are you responding to foods? I just think that's such a valuable tool to have on hand. And I'll link the glucose monitor that I use with clients in case you're someone who's like super curious about it. They used to have a deal for like $49 for 2 weeks. They took that away, but now I think it's $99 or $100 and you get two sensors. You wear each one for 2 weeks and you can track what your blood sugar is doing throughout the day, which again can be super helpful. Okay, lifestyle factors. So smoking does decrease your heart rate variability, chronic dehydration. Again, we talked about minerals and the importance of that. Especially like I live in Houston, it is so humid. It is so humid. And the amount that we sweat in a day is just crazy. There are days where I feel like I take 3 showers a day just because I just cannot. Maybe in the future there'll be a move. I don't know, just kind of putting that out in the world, but I'm ready for a less humid city. But again, if you live somewhere where it's extremely hot, even if you're not out sweating profusely, chances are you have low mineral levels, especially if you're someone who's been stressed, who's been living in chronic fight or flight. Maybe you're someone who eats really healthy, like really whole foods. I would say the majority of the salt in our diet comes from processed foods. And so I'm not telling you to go and eat processed foods. We definitely want to minimize those. But what I'm saying is if you're only eating, fresh fruits and veggies and lean meats and, all that, that's great, but you need to salt your food really well. Okay, now let's talk about fertility specifically. Because if you're listening to this podcast, more than likely you're working on your fertility, you're working on your hormones, you're wanting to support better cycles, better mood, better digestion, better health, all the things. With fertility clients specifically, the things that I see that impact heart rate variability the most are the following. So, someone not eating enough calories, like we've talked about, not eating enough carbohydrates, having just wonky blood sugar levels throughout the day, too much exercise or too much being on compared to resting, right? So if our body is not resting, if it's not recovering, all we're doing is creating more and more stress. If there is chronic stress or anxiety and we don't have the tools to regulate that, that can also have our body feel like we're in this constant state of fight or flight. And so that's where I think stress management and if you're someone who's working on your fertility and you're struggling with infertility, I just want to say that that can be a lot. And I think it's really, really useful and powerful, obviously, to have a prayer life around that and to have connection around that. So whether maybe that's a therapist that you're talking to or a friend or just someone, if you're a client of mine, we're talking about it. But I think it's really important to have an outlet because getting thoughts and emotions out of the body is so necessary because if we don't get them out, they're just going to get stored inside. And gosh, there's so much we could talk about that in terms of storing emotions in the body and how that can create stress and inflammation and therefore then lead to chronic illnesses. So again, just finding ways to communicate, to get emotions out, to get stress out. And that could even be journaling. Like if that's something that works for you. And I know not everyone is someone who likes to journal. I go through phases. There's some phases where I'm like, I'm all about it. I love it. And then other times I'm like, I'm not about to sit down and journal for the life of me. Like that is just not what I'm going to do with my time. But I think having ways where you can just release stress that isn't also creating more stress. And then underlying inflammation, I would say this is a huge one. I have a fertility client right now who we are working on all the things and her cycles are improving. Her sleep is improving, her just how she feels overall, her mood, it's so cool to me how once we start to work on the foundations, women just have this epiphany on how good they can actually feel, on how good their digestion can be, how regular their bowel movements can be, how much less bloated they are. They didn't even realize they were bloated, how much more, like how much capacity they have to spend time with their significant others, to spend time with their friends, to actually enjoy life, to be in a better mood, to have less intense periods. Like there's so much that improves. And if you have not listened to the episode that talks about all of the signs that tell us that your fertility is improving and is moving in the right direction, go listen to that episode. I'll link it below. Super helpful. Because a lot of times, fertility is like you're either pregnant or you're not if you're working on getting pregnant. And so it's nice to see progress when we haven't gotten that positive pregnancy test yet, just to know that what you're doing is working. And again, I think something else to track could be heart rate variability. Now, I'm not saying that if you don't have a tool that tracks that you should go out and get one. I'm not saying that, but I am saying that if you have a tool already that tracks that, it's just nice to gauge where you're at. It's something I always ask my clients, like, hey, what's your heart rate variability? What's your resting heart rate? What's your body temperature? Because those things can tell us so much about your health, your overall health. And so kind of going back with that client I was talking about, like we've worked on all the things and she's seen such massive improvements. And then her heart rate variability is not budging and it is extremely low. And so I'm beginning to wonder, like, where is this hidden stressor or inflammation coming from that is not allowing your body to fully recover, to like have just more regulated nervous system, which is so important for hormone production and for feeling safe in our own body. Okay, other things to know about heart rate variability in terms of your cycle. So if you're someone who is tracking your cycle, obviously if you're not tracking your cycle, I do think that's really beneficial to know where you're at, how long your cycles are, how regular you are, when your ovulation is, when your fertile window is, and we can do episodes on that too. But basically, some things to know about heart rate variability in terms of your cycle. And this, if you're tracking this, you'll see this, that with your follicular phase, our heart rate variability is higher during the follicular phase. During the luteal phase, so after ovulation, it will dip down. Now, usually dips down as progesterone rises. And then typically right before we bleed, that's when we'll have our lowest heart rate variability. Obviously, there's a lot of different factors that affect that number, but that's kind of what that will do throughout the cycle. Okay, before doing this episode, I did some research. I wanted to see what the newest articles were showing, because I think this is an area that's going to be talked about more and more and more. And what I found is I found a few articles that to me were really interesting. So I will link them below if you're into reading research articles. One of the articles that I found was an article about heart rate variability, specifically with women undergoing IVF. Now, IVF is not an option that I talk about. It's not aligned with my faith, our faith. I'm just kind of giving that disclaimer. However, I do think the article is really helpful at pointing out that women with higher heart rate variability did have better outcomes with IVF cycles. So taking the IVF out of it is just looking at, okay, well, clearly there's a connection here between higher heart rate variability, a body being in a more adaptable, flexible, nourished, safe state, and being able to conceive. There was another article that looked at heart rate variability and male fertility and we'll do more episodes on male fertility if that's something that interests y'all, because realistically, like, we're only half of the puzzle, right? So women are only 50% of fertility, and then the other 50% is the male. So it is really important what your significant other is doing, what your husband is doing before trying to get pregnant is important. It's important to know that 90 days before you conceive, so what you're doing the 90 days before conception for both you and your partner impacts the health and quality of your egg and his sperm. So, just like you are working on eating enough and getting enough sleep and managing your stress and working on your blood sugar levels, it's just as important that your husband do that as well, because that does impact the health of his sperm, which then impacts the health of your future baby. So I always tell clients, the goal is, yes, to get you pregnant, right? For you to conceive naturally. And my secondary goal for you is that you have the healthiest pregnancy and the healthiest baby possible. At the end of the day, God is in control, but there are so many things that we can do to support our health and the health of our future generations. So that being said, I'll link that article because it was looking at how men who have higher heart rate variability do have better fertility in terms of the male side of fertility. One more that I thought was really interesting, especially because I know PCOS, or now PMOS, impacts a lot of women who may be listening to this podcast. And women with PCOS tended to have lower heart rate variability than women who didn't have PCOS. Now, if you have PCOS and you're like, "Ah, dang it, one more thing that I kind of get dinged on because I have PMOS." The way that I want to look at it is, regardless of your diagnosis, and this is really what I see with clients, is regardless of what the diagnosis is, the foundations are the same. Maybe with PMOS, you do have some more issues with blood sugar, but if we're working on the foundations and we're improving your overall calorie intake, we're improving your blood sugars, we're working on your gut health, we're working on your vaginal microbiome, we're working on your nervous system, all the things, then your heart rate variability should improve. Okay, now we're going to talk about probably my favorite part of the episode, because it's just things that I've done that I think have been really helpful, obviously, in seeing that big shift. And again, I want you to hear this as not things that you need to do, but maybe things to play around with. Because again, I'm not saying that I know for sure it was one of these that made my heart rate variability drastically increase. I think it was a combination of all of them. But if you were going to try any of these, comment back and let me know, are these also working for you? Because I'm just so curious which one of these, and I am really clear on which one of them definitely impacts it. Anyways, we're just going to get into it. Okay, so one of the things I've done over the past 3 to 4 months is really being intentional of being on social media less. So beginning of the year, I took I think it was over a month, completely off of all social media. I had a brick device. I'll link that on there if you will find that helpful, but it's basically this little device that you can tap your phone to, and it bricks whatever app you don't want access to. And the only way that you can access the app is if you go back to that brick device and unbrick your phone. I literally bricked it the beginning of January and loved it so much that I just never unbricked for over a month. And it was so, so good for my nervous system. I didn't realize how much my brain was on and how much I always felt like I was always working, because yes, part of my job is being on socials, getting my information out there so that I can find and reach the right women who really need my help and support, because that's my mission in life, is to help more women get pregnant naturally. And what better way to do that than to put myself out there and talk to the women who need to hear it. But at the time, I just needed more silence. I needed more peace. And I will say I felt so much more calm, and I felt like my brain just had space, just had space. It was lovely. It was amazing. A lot of amazing things came out of that. I was really intentional then of I wasn't looking at my phone first thing in the morning. I wasn't looking at my phone before going to bed. I wasn't looking at it throughout the day. I just had more capacity. And I felt like my body was finally able to feel like this inner sense of peace. At the same time, I did take up praying more and reading the Bible more and was doing that daily and journaling. And man, just that one shift was so impactful for me. Okay, something else that I did was we started incorporating more evening walks after dinner. So, evening walks are super, super helpful, especially after having dinner, because they help regulate your blood sugars. They also help you unwind and de stress. So, being outside, moving your body, breathing fresh air, again, it was just something that was just so natural and like human versus being on a screen. So, that was so, so helpful for me. I saw a drastic improvement in HRV there, as well as just like going to sleep easier and waking up feeling way more rested. So, if that's something that you have not tried, even if it's like 15, 10-minute, 20-minute walk after dinner, especially because if you're in Houston, it's hot and that time is so much nicer to be outside. You're also syncing up your circadian rhythm. So there's that little extra bonus point of seeing natural sunlight and like seeing the sunset is super, super helpful. And telling your body, hey, it's time to unwind. It's time to start producing the hormones that we need to produce, time to be able to downregulate and get a good night of sleep. Something else that I did is, and this is in regards to social media, is I started unfollowing and muting almost every account that I follow. That was so helpful for me. If you're a clinician listening, which who knows, maybe I have some dietitians listening as well, or someone who's in business and who feels like, and even if you're not in business, but you just feel like you have to stay on top of things all the time and you feel like you get into this comparison trap, even if you're in your fertility journey and like constantly seeing other people's lives and other people's kids and like their pregnancies and their things, that's so overstimulating and it takes you away from what you actually have going on in your life. So for me, muting people and just like not knowing what they're doing and not knowing what they're doing in business helped me just focus on what I do have versus what I don't have. And that was super helpful and regulating for me. The other thing that I started adding in, and this one I don't do every night, but every once in a while I will do a topical magnesium spray on my feet. And I already take magnesium at night, but I just wanted to try it out because I think a company sent it to Brett. And so I was like, you know what, let me just try it out. I sleep so deep and wake up so relaxed when I take that. I'll check what the brand is and I'll link it. I don't think we have a discount code, but it's just like, wow, I saw a huge difference in that. And I do think that my body does really well with topical absorption of magnesium versus just a supplement. Okay. Another thing I started doing was because I wasn't looking at my phone when I would first get out of bed, depending on what time my kids were getting out of bed, if they were waking me up, sometimes this wasn't possible. But I would just do a few simple stretches. So doing a forward fold is always really relaxing for me. It helps open up my lower back, stretching out my arms, folding over each leg individually and just breathing. That really set the tone for starting my day. And again, just help my body feel recovered and just overall good. The more we can feel calm and slow down during the day, the more flexible and more adaptable our body can be because we're not living in this state of stress. Like I'm not jumping out of bed, stressed out already, trying to do a million things. I can give myself 5-10 minutes to just breathe. And a lot of times it looks like I'm on the floor, folded over, and my kids are on top of me, which honestly gives me a better stretch overall. So it's fine. And then sometimes my husband will take them downstairs. So it just really, go with the flow of what works and how much time you have each day. The next one is going to sleep early. So going to sleep by 9:30 is a non-negotiable for me because it is so helpful in me assuring that I'm going to get at least a decent amount of sleep because you never know. Like we have 2 kids, you never know what the night's going to look like. But going to bed by 9:30, one, gives my body time to unwind. It keeps me from doing stuff at night that I don't need to be doing. Like I don't need to be working at 9 p.m. at night. I don't need to be scrolling through my phone. It's nice. Like I can just unwind and I feel like I've like conquered something by doing that. Okay, this last one, honestly, I almost hesitated to share this one because take what you will from it. But so we have a cold plunge And there's a lot of information out there and research with women in cold plunging. And like for some people, it's really great. For some others, it's not. I would say if you're in a chronic state of stress, getting in a really cold plunge may not be exactly what you need. You need to work on all of the other foundations and stress management tools. But for me, I'm not perfect by any means. There's a lot of things I need to work on. But most of my foundations, like I eat regularly, my blood sugar's stable. I really try to make it a point to find restful pauses throughout the day. I try to not rush through my life. I try to not stress over small things. Like there's a lot of things that I've done over the years to help improve my nervous system overall. I kind of go back and forth with cold plunging, but we now have our cold plunge set at about 45 degrees. And something that I started doing, especially because it's been so hot out, is either right before dinner or after I've gotten our kids to bed is I'll do a 3-minute cold plunge. And I'm sure it's a combination of the cold water, which also helps decrease inflammation, but also cold exposure to the back of your neck gets your vagus nerve. That helps bring your body into the parasympathetic side of the nervous system. So for me, after even if it has been a great calm day, having kids is a lot and running a business is a lot and trying to be a good wife is a lot. Like all the things are always a lot. And so finding ways to downregulate, and that's one of mine that just works for me. Especially as someone who used to be like an adrenaline junkie, I think having that like intense cold exposure just resets me. And for me, it's so relaxing to be in there and I just focus on my breath and we have it outside. So I get to look up at the sky. And I swear, in 3 minutes, I get out of there and I am a new person. And I'm so ready to just like relax and wind down. And I sleep so great. And I've tested it out several times. And the nights that I actually do a cold plunge, my heart rate variability, there's been nights where it gets to like 99, 100. And I'm like, whoa, that's crazy. But I think it's really because it's forced me almost to like be in this meditative breathing state and just unwind. Now, some disclaimers I want to say about cold plunging. If you've never done it and you're working on your fertility, that is not the first thing I recommend you do at all. Something that I think would be really beneficial for you is maybe trying a cold shower. Like, why don't you just try a cold shower first and see if that does something for you? If you are going to try that, please let me know if that supported your HRV, because I'm just so curious. Or even if you take some cold ice and rub it on the back of your neck for a while, like any kind of temperature exposure, even if it's a warm bath. I think water is so healing in general, but then I think these like intense temperature shifts can be so regulating for our nervous system. So maybe it's a warm bath, maybe it's a cold shower, but like kind of playing around with these temperature shifts to then shift your body into a more relaxed state and see if that works. I recently heard from a fertility doctor, who talks about all the things, but she was saying that a cold plunge specifically around ovulation is not ideal because ovulation is an inflammatory event and not all inflammation is bad. We need some level of inflammation in our body. And so if we are lowering our inflammation all the time, if we're doing all the things to lower it, then we're not allowing that natural inflammation to happen. So it could actually cause you to have a weaker ovulation or skip ovulation. That's something I recently heard, thought I would share. So especially if you're going to be trying this out, if you have a cold plunge, just be cognizant of when in your cycle you're doing that. And again, I'm someone who's been doing cold plunges for a really, really long time. I even did them throughout parts of pregnancy, and we can do an episode on that if you're interested in that. Yeah, so that kind of sums everything up. I would love to hear some comments from y'all to see kind of where you're at with your HRV. Is that something you track? If you try anything that I talk about on this podcast, let me know if it worked for you. I would love to hear more. Thank you for being here. If you loved this episode, please leave a review. That really helps the podcast reach more women. Share it with a friend of yours, with a sister, with a mom, with someone in your life who you think would really benefit from this podcast. And I will see y'all next time.